With the Resident Evil 3 Nemesis remake being released earlier this year, me and a friend started to think, could a Resident Evil 4 remake follow its predecessor's footsteps, or is it not all that necessary? How are we today, everybody? I hope you're all good. My name is Peter, and for today's video, I decided to take a video request from one of my personal friends who wanted to hear my opinions on whether or not the 2005 classic Resident Evil 4 should get a remake in the same style that both Resi 2 and 3 have received in the past couple of years. To give you guys a bit of background, I don't particularly play a lot of horror games, but I first tried the Wii version of Resident Evil 4 back when I must have been about 14 or 15, and it has since become one of my personal favourite titles out there. I really enjoyed the elements of action it added to the series while also being atmospherically well put together, and I must have played through the entire game from start to finish several times over. I really had that much fun. While I haven't played much of the series outside of this, I am interested in eventually getting more into it in the future. Anyway, after both Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis have seen completely new remakes brought into the modern era, many are talking about the potential for the next main series title to follow its PS1 predecessor's footsteps. So what's my thoughts on the matter? What would I want to see? Do I think this is even necessary in the first place? Let's get into it. The first talking point I wanted to start on is whether a remake of Resident Evil 4 is actually necessary or not. On the one hand, it is widely considered to be one of the greatest games of all time, and people still love to play it to this day. Would a remake that changes the way it is played either take it to new heights, or would it have the potential to damage its legacy? I imagine Resi 4 in particular will be a game that has many expectations on its shoulder if Capcom were to recreate it from the ground up. Additionally, we've seen several re-releases of the game on almost every gaming platform that has come out since its initial release on the GameCube in 2005. It has been ported to PS2, Wii, PC, Xbox 360, PS3, iOS, Android, Zebo, Wii U, PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. Wow, that's a long list. Resident Evil 4 has pretty much joined the likes of Skyrim and Street Fighter 2 to the point where they are basically memed for their countless re-releases. Could its ease of accessibility be a factor on whether it gets the spotlight over this hypothetical remake? Could a remake run the risk of competing with the source material it originated from? On the other hand, there are definitely some good reasons to consider when it comes to modernising this classic in a new way. Not everyone was a fan of the more action-oriented gameplay that Resi 4 brought to the table, and considered it the starting point of the series leaning more towards action and focusing less on its survival horror roots in future titles. Depending on who you ask, this direction wasn't to everyone's tastes, but now that we've seen the likes of Resident Evil 7, the recently announced Resident Evil Village, and the remakes of 2 and 3 going back to the horror side of things, perhaps putting more emphasis on horror could make the story of Leon and the Last Plagueis Parasite more appealing to fans of games that lean more towards horror. While 4 does have its scary moments and has been praised by many for balancing horror and action just right, maybe a bigger emphasis on the scary side will appeal to those that weren't satisfied with the action. Despite the generally high praise I have for Resi 4, I do feel like there is room for improvement that I think would be ideal to see in a remake. One way I think it could be improved is to make access to ammo much more limited. I don't know about anyone else, but when I played through the game, I've never really struggled in terms of running out of ammo, as it seems to get handed to you every 10 seconds if you know where to look. Perhaps that's the reward for constantly keeping your eyes peeled, but I felt the game became rather easy because I never felt afraid of running out, therefore removing some of that scary element. Perhaps making ammo much more scarce could help with creating more tense moments, as even on my first ever playthrough, I don't think I really ran into any situations like this. Then again, when it comes to games in general, I tend to have a habit of hoarding my resources, thinking that there'll be a better use for them later on, like holding onto some of the stronger healing items in a Dragon Quest game for example, so maybe that's just me. Plus, during combat, I'd often do the same thing over and over again when taking on enemies. I'd shoot in the head, then run up for a kick, then stab them while they're on the ground until they're gone. I know there are other ways of fighting and the game does leave the player with alternative options, but I'm questioning whether there's a way for the game to maybe punish me for spamming the same actions repeatedly, potentially encouraging me to mix things up a little. And of course, we have possibly the main problem people have with this game, to the point where some would describe half of it as a glorified escort mission. This is because Ashley Graham, the president's daughter and person you pretty much have to keep out of harm's way, always finds herself in trouble, getting snatched away the moment you turn your back, which definitely frustrated a lot of players. I could understand the perspective in which this takes away the feeling of isolation that players come to expect in a horror experience, but in some ways, I feel like having her around gives the game higher stakes, forcing you to watch out for any threats, which within itself kept me on edge during my experience with the game. Because of this, I think Ashley should be kept around, but maybe, unlike the original, she could fight back in her own way rather than just being defenseless and being forced to babysit her. If I were to describe how this could work, maybe it could be like Ellie from The Last of Us or Atreus in God of War 2018, who are both AI-controlled companions that are still quite limited in what they can do, but are still capable of lending a helping hand. Maybe this would lead more towards the action genre, something that some fans might not like as I've stated earlier, but at the same time, this could make Ashley more bearable to put up with, as I don't think it will make too much sense to get rid of her completely, seeing as her abduction was the driving force behind the story and the reason Leon is out in Europe in the first place. Despite what I've listed above, I'm hoping that this hypothetical remake maintains the atmosphere and set pieces I came to love about the original and take them to new highs. As one of my favourite games out there, I'd be intrigued to see what direction Capcom would take to reintroduce this well-known classic to a new generation and make it enticing to experience all over again. Anyway, that just about does it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. What would you want to see if we ever saw a Resident Evil 4 remake? Do you agree or disagree with some of the points I've made in this video and why? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, see you later.